like, do you see it as like a failure? It fails at being a nourishing breakfast, or what's your main critique of that style of cereal?
I don't know. I ate some and I was like, this doesn't seem healthy at all, in no way whatsoever. But the same time, when I was a kid, I'd eat like super sugary
Mm-hmm.
things. So I'm not really like too crazy. Like, you know what I mean? As a parent, I'm not like, you gotta eat this. You know, obviously at dinner, she has to eat vegetables and stuff. But you want to eat super sugary cereal or candy, like
Mm-hmm.
um,
Obviously.
I'm like, she'll like ask if she can have candy, and I'll be like, I told you not to ask me if you could have candy. Just eat candy. It's fine. But she still asks me.
So you kind of allow this, and this is with your daughter, to self-regulate in a way, her, whether like she has your permission to have the candy, and then it's up to her to decide
Exactly.
whether it's a
Yeah.
good
I mean,
decision or not. But you model in your own way moderation, it seems. Yeah.
sometimes. I mean, there are times when I'm like, she asked me if she could, she asked if like, we're about to eat in 30 minutes. She's like, can I have some candy? And I'm like, no, you can't have candy. You know what I mean? But generally it's after dinner, whatever. It's not, you know, eat the candy. It's fine. Or like the other day, she
Yes.
actually,
Yeah.
she ate all her Easter candy, and we're at the store, and she's like, you know, I'm all out of candy. And I was like, well, we should get you some candy then. So I got her like a big bag of like Hershey's and like a big bag of like the nerd clusters, which are awesome. Like they're like gummies with like nerds wrapped around them.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just like the best candy. Remember nerds, like
Ah,
those little balls that like, yeah, they were like a little
totally.
like
They're
carton.
like two balls joined together.
Yeah, they're little
Yeah.
little teeny
And
balls.
it would always, the carton would always get soggy by the end.
Well, I don't know.
Or
They
at
feel
least,
pretty
yeah,
quick.
it
I could see
is.
because, like, yeah, you like
Mm-hmm.
slobber on it a little bit when you like turn it. Like maybe it would get little
Mm-hmm.
wet. I don't know.
It depends. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, the boxes were pretty big. It was almost like the size. It's like a box of cigarettes, and there was like two flavors. They still have that. It's like one flavor on one side and one on the other, and then there's like a little. Each has its own opening.
Yeah, they don't
I don't know.
have like I've looked
Nerds.
and they don't have
Yeah.
like the nerds like just the nerds. They have the nerd clusters, and I would suggest them if you're
Uh,
because they're not like they are sweet, but they're not like too sweet, and they're like gummy and like if it's like midnight and you got some midnight
mm-hmm.
munchies, they are very very good. Very
Sounds
good.
good. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the type of food that I think in like your indigenous culture that you grew up in, you never just question it. And but now if like looking at it from the outside, I haven't thought about those for a while. Or like from a German perspective, like I don't know if there are nerds here, but I would just wonder like why is it called nerds? Like why? I mean, I remember like the box art, it's like the two little things come together and form like a weird little dodo style bird thing, or like a human with like a long weird nose or something. But it's like, what about them is nerdy? Like, why did they choose to have that association? But as a kid, I just accepted, oh yeah, those are nerds, you know, like you want some nerds, or you know, nerds would be in circulation. But I don't know, what do you think? Why do you think they were called that?
You know, I have no idea. I don't know if the word like nerd existed in the 70s. Like I wasn't, I don't know. Did they have the word nerd
Mm-hmm.
in the 70s? In the 80s, they definitely could have Revenge of the Nerds. Like the idea was a nerd was a thing, but in the 70s, like were there
Yes.
nerds? Like when did the word nerd begin? I never questioned it personally myself, but I like those little guys, because it's like there's little
Mm-hmm.
guys. So like I guess they are the nerds, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
know why they are the nerds.
Mm-hmm. Maybe it's so that you don't feel as bad about eating them.
Huh. I don't know. I really liked him when I was a kid, though.
Let me ask you, Brian, like introduce yourself. Who are you? Where do you come from? What's the essence of Brian?
Um,
Or Bry,
yeah.
if you ever go by Bry.
Well, I do with you, and I like that. You know, I guess for like being here, I like to write. Since I was like 16, I did get like an ebook published when I was like in my early 30s, but nobody really bought it. So just like I've written poetry since I've been 16. I dropped out of like community college, and like wrote a novel in my early 20s, and I rewrote that like 10 times. I tried to submit it a couple times, but like it's like really, really, really well edited to like the comma level. Like the last edit I went through was like, there's like 5 commas that I was like, do I need a comma there? So like to like that precise of a point. But like, you know, you need to know somebody, obviously. And like, I just like dropped out of like community college and just like wrote it. And it took like, you know, a long time to like get it to like part where it's like good enough. So then I wrote like another like novel in my 20s. And I wrote like a fair amount. And I wrote a draft of another novel before I got married. I wrote a draft after I got divorced. So I like have 2 novels that I like. One I edited a ton. One I edited like 3 or 4 times. 2 that are still drafts, but parts are still like I've revised. The novella I got published, and a bunch of like short stories and stuff, or I've started stuff. But you know, I never really like knew anybody, or I've tried. It's hard to like figure out where to like publish anything. You know what I mean? Where sometimes be like, oh, I could try to like submit a poem here, but it's hard. So now, like, you know, I'm in my 40s, and a lot of stuff I wrote when I was younger, like, you know, that was the younger me, younger and more reckless, I'd say, where I'm kind of like 40, and I'm like, maybe I don't want to put that out there, or like, how would I even like talk about it? So, you know, and, you know, I grew up in Southern California.
Do you still like identify with that earlier version of yourself?
You know, no. No, because like, I'm a lot like wiser, more chilled out. And like, I was pretty reckless when I was young, and like, didn't like, you know, I was fairly responsible, but I wasn't like, yeah, I was reckless. I don't think I like managed my mental health the best. And, you know, I think when like you're in your mid 40s and you're like, you look back at like maybe like art or writing you did in like your 20s or early 30s, and you're like, well, I don't know, like it's hard, like you don't connect to it. So it's like, I have all these things that I've written, but like, I don't know if they'd be of interest to be published, but, or like, I wouldn't like want to go and like talk about it, you know, like the novella I got published as an ebook about like, about like, you know, letting like a friend that was like struggling with substance abuse like stay on your couch because he's homeless, and then how that's gonna like blow up, right? And like people just kind of like sitting around and, you know, smoking some pot and telling like old stories, because that's how I kind of told the story. You know, I don't know if I really want to like talk about that, or it's like I'm not even interested in that story anymore. You know what I mean? And then like I was trying to,
that past is in the past, right?
Yeah.
But it's a document of that time in a way, and like so maybe it has, you know, it kind of stands on its own in it as like an independent expression of that instance and of you as an artist then. But it's interesting that like your perspective, I find that really interesting, and I appreciate it, and I agree with it. It involves like when you look back on your past self, you also you like judge yourself, or you have a sense of aspects of your personality that you may have wanted to move past that then manifest themselves like in things you may have written or made. It's not just like decisions you made, but you as like an artist or as a like a creator. It's somehow, so you can kind of place that work in that time of your life, and maybe it's inevitable that you'd be kind of allergic to it.
Yeah, I mean, I like having it there, because I like going back and like looking at haven't gone back on that, but I was looking through a lot of like journals and stuff today, or like stuff I've written. I'd be like, oh, that's interesting, I forgot about that. Oh, you know, so it is interesting to me, but like I don't know. I was trying to like, when I was trying to like internet date a few years ago, like this one like woman that was like a musician and stuff and artistic. I was like, oh yeah, I got this book written, and I kind of told her what it was about, and she's like, oh, you know, and it was kind of like red flaggish, or she's like, oh, okay, and then like that was kind of like it, and I was like, oh yeah, it's not like the best. Didn't seem like the best like reflection of myself, you know, even though I mean it wasn't me with the substance abuse issue, you know what I mean? But it was like just the connection to it, you know what I mean? if you're young or whatever, you make like some like punk rock album or whatever, you know what I mean? And then like nothing happens with it. Like 15 years later, you can be like, hey, well, this when I was like 22 or 23, I made this punk rock album. And, you know, like, how would you even like relate to that or like sell it or whatever? You know what I mean? I mean, there are like punk bands that obviously are like, nearly like 60-year-old people like going out there and playing songs they wrote like 30 years ago very enthusiastically. You know what I mean? And there's like 40-year-olds going there to see it.
It's true. That's a great example. Well, like the Rolling Stones, you know, they're like of extremely advanced age, you know, like practically on their deathbeds, playing material that they, I think, in their late teens, you know, that like for what, like 70 years or something, or I mean, just huge span of time in terms of that connection to that earlier version of yourself. And that must be weird, like having this persona of performance that connects back to that. And so Brian is going to transition us to speak about some of his works.
Okay, so we were kind of talking about like persona or like perceiving yourself, perceiving others and stuff like that. So this was like inspired by this book, Kokoro. This one's like was published in like 1916, and this guy's like Natsume Sōseki. I'd probably mispronounce, but he's like really he's like one of the top 5 Japanese writers. So I wrote like the first part of it after reading the first section and the second part after reading the second section. And then that's titled Only in Time, Love is Perfect. In a sentimental mood, I think of you, where you live in my heart, maybe as you never were. Have I ever seen you? But you had disabused me, seen me for what I couldn't. I was grateful to be seen. In memories you live, warm fires that burn quickly, hearths we return to yearly until we don't. Time cuts through me, delusions leave but remain. I must live in others' hearts, maybe as I never was. The third death will come, the lives inside my heart will die, even if they still live. So that's part 1. This is part 2. In a bitter heart, attachments become traps. The fear of being hurt or encumbered and burdened. How a sweet laugh and a screamed recrimination can come from the same mouth. These feelings pass, another joy, another worry, the mind always doing, seen but still seething. It's a blessing to forget. So many years ago, you can't remember. I haven't arrived yet. In sentiment, I know you, without bitterness, while there's things I wish forgiven, we were all we had. And that's the end.
Very nice, man. How do you see the connection there between Kokoro and the written piece?
Well, so Kokoro means heart in Japanese. The Kokoro book is about this young university student that becomes friends with this older man who he calls sensei, but like not in like the Karate Kid like lame Western way, but like in a very respectful way, like as it's supposed to be. And so the first 2 sections is like how this university student meets this man who seems odd. He becomes friends with him, and like the man has kind of rejected the world, and he has like enough wealth to not work, not to be like wealthy, but not to work. So he becomes like friends with him, and the young student's like trying to figure out like why he's so like sad and has rejected the world. And then like the last section's like this letter that he writes to the young man telling him why he has like rejected the world. And it's like very like sentimental. And it's like there's parts where like the student goes back, because the student lives in Tokyo, and then he goes back to like his country, smaller town, like where his dad's dying, and so it really made me think about like, you know, going back to like because I've lived in Denver for like 20 years almost, and like I used to go back and visit my family, but like just don't have the money. So like I could like, so it was
Back
like
in
a lot of
California?
these things like over the years. Yeah, there's like a lot of things over the years where it's like, you go to this house, you have these things, you have like this comfort, and then like it ends. People move, people get older, you know what I mean? Like times change, or like, like for a period of years you would do X, and then like that's no longer exists, you know what I mean? Like the house my parents like lived in, they've moved, like they're older now, so they don't really host things like my sister does, like just stuff like that. I know it's kind of hard to get like a poem in like the first one hearing it once, you know what I mean? But in here, I'll read the first one again.
Yeah, please.
In a sentimental mood, I think of you, where you live in my heart, maybe as you never were. Have I ever seen you? But you disabused me, seen me for what I couldn't. I was grateful to be seen. In memories you live, warm fires that burn quickly, hearths we return to yearly until we don't. Time cuts through me, delusions leave but remain. I must live in others' hearts, maybe as I never was. The third death will come, the lives inside my heart will die, even if they still live. Like you, Dave, exist in me somewhere, and I see you, and you like exist as like a person inside of me, right? So then like once I die, like you that existed in me no longer is. So like I didn't take like I was inspired to write, but like the ideas there from me, like so like the third death is like in like Latin culture, like Day of the Dead, right? So like you die, first death, your soul leaves your body is the second death, and then the third death is you're forgotten. So like the Day of the
like
Dead,
your social death,
the cemetery. So like you are not, yeah, you're not forgotten, right? So like, so it's like, so like, and I've had like, so everything like in the poem is like from my experience, but I was just like the emotion it brought up in me, because is what was there. So it's like the idea of like how you perceive yourself, like how you exist as like an idea to like you, Dave, exist as an idea to me, right? And not you probably exist as an idea to me like uniquely, you know what I mean? As you exist to everybody you know uniquely, right? So then like a lot of times like, and like you can't always like see yourself. So sometimes like you're like like when I worked at a bookstore a long time ago, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a chill person. And then this one woman I worked with, she's like, yeah, no, you're not chill at all. And I was like, yeah, no, a lot of times I'm not very chill, like at all. You know what I mean? So sometimes you need to be like disabused of like these ideas, you know what I mean? Or like, or like sometimes like you interact with somebody and like, they'll remember something from that interaction that you forget completely, and you'll remember something else. So it's like it's almost the idea of like what is real, what's not. Like I perceive something and like maybe like that exists just within me, so like there's a person of everything, everybody I know exists in me in a certain way, and then like once I die, their existence of themselves in me is dead, right? But they could still be living. So it's like you see me a certain way, like you have experienced me a certain way. You probably remember things of our interactions that I don't.
For sure.
And then I remember things of our interactions that you don't. You know what I mean? So it's like, and then like the line like, on the second one, it's a blessing to forget. So many years ago, you can't remember. I haven't arrived yet. So like, like forgetting things is like a blessing, like, cause you don't want to old lang syne, like, old acquaintance we forgot, you know what I mean? Cause there's people I worked with or something. I spent like significant amount of time with them and I can't really remember their name, you know what I mean? Or stuff like that. Or there's certain like periods of my life where I'm like, oh man, I don't even like, I couldn't even like really tell you stuff. I mean, I did like journal and write stuff, so I could probably go back and get it, you know, be very surprised by it. But like, one of the things, like my grandma, like she lost her husband in the Korean War. And so my grandfather died in the Korean War. Okay. So we were going to like a family reunion, and like I was like writing stuff down. And I was like, okay, like what, you know, tell me about this stuff. And so my grandfather in the Korean War, there was like a gun turret or something, and he went to it and he told the radio guy to like go back. Like he took over the gun turret for some reason, because he was like a captain, or I don't know, he'd been in the military for a while. And then so the radio guy ran back, and then a mortar went and hit like the gun turret area, and he died from a mortar shell, right?
Damn. Okay.
But like, you don't like, I don't know what they do now, but they don't like tell people, like they don't go to the wife and be like, hey, your husband died like this. You know what I mean? So she didn't know how he died until like in the mid 60s. So the Korean War was like, and like, I think he died in 50 or 51. So mid 60s, this guy that was like the radio operator called her like drunk and was like, hey, he saved my life and he died, and it should have been me, or like, I don't know what he said, but like she didn't know like how he died until the mid 60s when this guy called him, because it obviously was like weighing on his mind, like for years, you know what I mean? It'd be like a traumatic thing.
Yeah.
You know? And so then like, you know, that was 65. And then like, so this was like late 90s, 2000s. And my grandma's telling me about it. It's like, is that 35 or 35 years later? And she's like, gosh, I haven't even like thought about this for like years. So like she had like, you know, not like she didn't love him, but like, you know, she like her life moved on. And like, so there's certain things where it's like, you forget, you know what I mean? And it's like a blessing in a way to forget. But I mean, like you want to remember too, because you only remember like so much.
Yes.
But then like, so like sometimes like painful things, like you want to forget, or like, you know, traumatic things. But a lot of times like traumatic things, like you can't forget, or you do forget, but they like live in the body. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like you can't fully just not entertaining them consciously doesn't mean that they're not operating somewhere on a subconscious level, or on a bodily register that you're not fully conscious of. So, but man, what a story. And then you know, it's also I like that with the idea of intergenerational memory and ideas and perception, because in that case it's like, here your grandfather died on this one day in the Korean War, right? Like, you know, in Korea, you know, and then the story of how he died, maybe it was recorded somewhere, but that the witness to the death, who we know of, you know, like that, the radio person, like they saw that guy, he remembered it, and then he conveyed it years later to your grandmother, and then she kept it with herself, and, you know, and probably told it to people or shared it along the way, but then in this instance shared it with you, that you remember, and now you are 25 years later sharing it here with us, and it's like that moment reverberates in these very interesting ways.
I mean, if he hadn't like if he hadn't called, you know, and like obviously it was like trauma, dude, that guy must have been like, think of the hours and hours and hours that he thought of that moment. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That like brought him to that point of being drunk and calling, like looking up my grandma and calling her. You know, thankfully there was like phone books back then.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So the third death, you know, and like we'll all like, so like we'll all like, there's a point where everybody we know or will ever know will be dead. You know what I mean? So then like the idea of you will die, or their idea of you, you know, which is just like an abstraction. It's not like the you, but it's like the idea of you.
Yes. Well, and maybe that, you know, to some extent, maybe that is you. I don't know. It's like, what do you identify with? It's hard to, to have your own, are you your body, or are you something else? Again, with this like persona and how we're identified, and how beauty is in the eye of the beholder, is like selfhood in the eye of the beholder, and we're actually outside of ourselves in a certain sense. I don't know, but
well, so I was kind of thinking about this, and I've kind of forgot, but I'm glad you kind of went there. But like in Buddhism, right? There's like the idea, like the root delusion is the self-grasping I, that like there is an I, that like there is a Brian, and like so that's the root delusion. And out of that delusion become not like delusion where you think you're like Santa Claus or whatever, like just like like an illusion, like in the Asian sense of delusion, right? Not the Western sense. So then like the self-grasping I, that's called the self-grasping I. And then out of that becomes attachment, where you're like, okay, well, like I like want this, or I want like this idea of myself, or like this makes me happy. This idea of myself makes me happy, but everything's like temporary. It's going to go away, or you're going to be like, the delusion's going to go away. You know what I mean? It's like, this thing is no longer making me happy. There's all sorts of reactions. And out of that, the delusion of attachment, and then the delusion of anger. So it's like you get angry at yourself for not being like what you want to be, or you become disillusioned by a goal that you never reached, or something's taken away from you, when like in the Buddhist sense, like everything is temporary, right? So it's like, it would be like, I'm very attached to myself, to my I, so I can't see beyond it, but it's like, I'm like a soul, I'm like a spirit. And then like this I, this like Brian, is like the root delusion. Like the self is like the root delusion. And like, obviously, like I can't get beyond that, but it's like, so if you think of like, with writing a lot, you could see it where it's like, okay, well, I'm going to write something 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And you look at that self of that time period, and it's like the focus, the worries, the joys. There's something like going through all of my life. Like I like being creative. There's certain things I really enjoy, right? But like myself is always changing. And it's like and there's points when I've been angry at myself, angry at the world, angry at other people, things get taken away. I'd get delusioned, like I'm unhappy with myself, I'm this. So it's like, if like you were, like, let's say you're less like selfless and compassionate, like it doesn't mean like you, like there is like fool's compassion, right? You don't want to be like overly, like there's dumb ways to be compassionate, right? But like, so that's how I see the self. Like I see the self as like kind of like the ultimate delusion. And like that like so that's how I see it. And I know that's like so I was kind of like I was kind of curious how like in your like philosophy, like if there's anything like equivalent, or because I remember I was watching one of your shorts about like I think therefore I am, kind of. And a lot of things. So like in therapy, like my therapist said, like anything you could imagine, you could feel. So it's like, let's say like you have like, you start thinking about like this person that made you mad, or the situation or something, and you could like get mad. You know what I mean? Like your body will like react to like being mad. So it's like anything you could imagine, like cause I'll spend a lot of time working at home, and I won't really interact with a lot of people, but my like, I'll go through a whole like wave of emotions just like being in my own head, and there's like nothing like necessarily external like happening, or like anything going out, but there's a whole like emotional like journey going on.
Yeah, I really like that idea. And I know I've been increasingly drawn to like that idea of the non-self, or moving beyond the self, and the self as a delusion or an illusion, or a construct in a certain sense, and that we deceive ourselves with it. And I think you mentioned that short. I made this video with this little guy, Friendo, this like YouTube video with this little puppet guy. But the idea was that he was confused about who he was. And then I suggested, well, he should read René Descartes, this Western, or he's like a French philosopher from the 17th century, who had that real famous line, I think therefore I am. And Descartes was very obsessed with defining the self and with avoiding confusion and with becoming clear and certain about what we know and how we know it, and then trying to go from there. And Descartes thought that the self of, in the sense of the I, like the thinking self, who's also, you know, predicating things like I do this, and that I is, we can be rock solid certain about it, and that it is there when you think it's accompanying those things. And but I think there's a big, like, I find Descartes' attempt at that noble and interesting, you know, and like philosophical. Like, I see why he did it, and I think that the book and his philosophy stands on that attempt. But I just don't think, I think it's also it fails, and that you know what he uncovered is itself part of that delusion of the self. Like the self thinks that it can be certain of its own selfhood in that moment. So there's been a lot of critiques of Descartes over the centuries that point at, you know, something similar, but I like that idea. But nonetheless, I do think that even if we recognize the, let's say, like the non-existence of self, or the, you know, try to move to a like non-selfhood based vision of ourselves, and or like a non-dualistic view of self and other, nonetheless it like there's something like seductive and repetitious about the self, that it reappears, and that, so maybe there's like a drive for it that we can't avoid. It's like compulsive, you know what I mean? Kind of like, and as you were saying, like you're at home,
Exactly.
even if you're aware, like on some level, that this self is delusional, nonetheless you're swept up in the delusion. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll continue. Is that your exercise bike in the background?
Yeah, I don't use it a ton, but like if I'll go play like soccer, so I'll maybe like ride that like 5-10 minutes, just so I don't like, or if I go skateboarding or something, but I don't really do that. Yeah, so I don't like hurt myself.
Oh, to like warm yourself up to get the
Totally.
to get the juices flowing.
But I'll ride it sometimes. I should do it more, but
I hear you.
Not enough.
All right, Brian's going to read us from 3 thematically connected pieces that he's written, and he'll elaborate kind of on the context for each. So, and I should mention, you may be able to hear it in our voices, but Brian and I are both Californians by upbringing, or young upbringing, Southern Californians in particular. So I like chatting with a fellow Southern Californian here and there. So especially living here in Stuttgart, I do not meet many fellow Southern Californians. You know, I don't know if you still consider yourself Southern Californian on some level, even though you've lived in Colorado for 2 decades, but there's certain things that I guess you can't
kind of. Like, you know, I grew up skateboarding and I grew up by the beach. It's very like unique kind of experiences to Southern California. I kind of don't, unless I was like rich, I wouldn't want to live in Southern California, or like well off. Because I don't know. I feel like, you know, I feel 50-50 when it comes to Southern California. I have my own personal issues with it. So, okay. So this is called Blue Mediterranean Sky. Also, it could be like called San Pedro #1. So, in a shadowed thrift store in San Pedro, a child holding strands of blue plastic beads, a mother somewhere, the store between 2 hills. The sky Mediterranean blue. Why this memory I always come back to. A field trip to Cabrillo Beach, a parking lot of eucalyptus trees, the bright ocean windy and choppy, and in between where the sun shone differently, the wind felt free. South of green cold ocean, overcast, the childhood home, but free on an adventure with my mother, or a brown bag school bus to an aquarium. Even further south to San Diego and my grandmother, bright and blue and free, the foam of broken waves, far from my older brother, from what I felt but not known in words, encouraged to draw and think, write down on a word processor, memories, 1 space after a comma, 2 spaces after a period. She taught me, my grandmother, intellectual and hot-blooded. I just want to be alone in the freedom of the blue Mediterranean sky, hills looking down, far from cold water, far from what is painful. I always come back to plastic beads, a shadowed aisle, my mother, a choppy and bright ocean, a moment of bright wind and blue, that lives in my mind still. And this one's called Purple Fabulosa. Urgently trying to grasp what you never can. What is the smell? Trying to grasp something out of reach and not lose. There's a secret in a smell, like my grandparents' kitchen in the hall of my apartment after they clean, that I can't place. But I remember the dawn, downing fabric softener, pineapple juice my diabetic grandfather would drink. A peaceful memory that I keep close to my heart, gone, but forever in my soul. A light through my chest that knows the secrets of spirits that I can't place, but sometimes meet. And this is San Pedro 2, which I just wrote a couple months ago. The breeze of San Pedro on top of a hill, always sunny in my memories, married at the Korean Bell, overlooking the Pacific, even in divorce and disillusion, disabused about people's goodness. I don't hold it badly, always green and sunny, steep hills and the water choppy, the lush salt ocean breeze like a soft glove over my skin, the sun or sweatshirt to counteract the coldness of the ocean, a memory to protect me from a pain I feel in my body, tense, ached, twitchy shoulders and arms, frozen but with a mind racing, memories of my mother and I, a few times shopping in a store between hills, chorizo at a restaurant called The Lighthouse, golden light, childhood smells, a back and forth between these memories and pain in my body. The body remembers even if we run, even if we sit and face it. I do and don't believe in people's goodness. To come this far in life, to learn in ways that hurt myself and others, just like any person, I can see how people leave it. People, expectations, things outside oneself. I see youthful skin and hope like a baby soft and plump, even in adults. As I age, healthier it seems than I ever was. In my mind, San Pedro, looking over the ocean, windy, sunny, alive, and safe. I could see it in my mind, like Abalone Cove in Palos Verdes by my sister, where we added our baby's ashes to the water, who was born and then died when he came too early at 20 weeks, little bones and dust. We'd marry, buy a house, have a child, then a dream destroyed, as divorce is. But to be a father, the greatest gift there is still, son and goodness in her and myself and others too. But why take this risk? Where does peace lie? I've always been happiest alone, except at times with family and friends. The warmth people give is like a fire, sometimes lit, then in a home until it moves, or the people who light it are somewhere else or gone. Time will leave only the light. In pain, I'll still see it was perfect. In time, a cleansing, not a hardship. Out of time, San Pedro, a memory, perfect. In time, I'll believe a destination I might never arrive, a knowledge I already know, but too fresh, too close, too painful. And that's it. So the one about it's called Purple Fabulosa because like they clean the halls and they would use that. That's like a floor cleaner, Purple Fabulosa. And my grandma would use it. And so like they'd clean it and I'd come in and I'd be like, what's this smell? It smells like my my grandparents. And then so like yeah, my grandmother's house. And then so like
your grandma's house.
I use Fabulosa, but I'd use like the citrus one. So then I ran out of that and I had the purple one and I poured it. And I was like, this is what my grandmother's house smells like. So when I wrote that, I didn't know it was like Purple Fabulosa that I was smelling. That's like the flower one or whatever. So like that smell, I was like, gosh, this is just like my grandma's house. Like my memories often go back to like San Pedro because it's like where I lived in like Torrance Redondo Beach,
Mm-hmm.
like if you see a map of like California, like it comes down like San Francisco and it comes down here's like LA and it kind of curves a little bit out, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you look at a map, it kind of curves a little bit and then it curves in. So like I lived like, and there's a
Mm-hmm.
beach and it's called Redondo Beach. So then like it goes and then it's like Palace, then it's like San Pedro. So like that's kind of like there's a harbor. So like way that is like, I'm not explaining this well. Basically like San Pedro, like because it's over here and it's not part of like this little like rounded cove, like this was really overcast. And like whenever I went to San Pedro, it wasn't overcast. It was always really sunny and
Mm-hmm.
like the way the ocean was. And so like my memories of like, it's like San Pedro was like a really happy place. Like San Diego, especially
Yeah.
my grandma's house was like really happy. And like I always kind of like go back to there.
Let me ask you this, like with regards to those, like what's the relationship for you between writing and grief, or writing and processing things, and or writing and life?
Writing poetry is definitely how like I deal with like a lot of emotions. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, maybe I'll just rifle through a couple poems here. Here we go. Here,
Yeah.
this is called.
Yeah. Add some more to the mix.
Yeah. So this one, a lot of times I'll like listen to music and like I'll just be like, I wrote After Crying to I Have Nothing by Whitney Houston. That's what that happened, but I think that makes a good title.
Yes.
When we long for a person, they are no longer who they were. Time has taken them to and left a feeling you can't let go of. When we long for a place, the house, the street, the corner, the park, buildings are painted, updated, torn down. The school no longer looks the same, a city you drive through without a home to go to. The house that was bought before the baby was born, before the divorce, before the dream was gone, now hated. The structure, the street, the color the walls were painted. They are no longer the walls where a baby learned to walk, ate spaghetti with her hands. First Christmas and gatherings, tender moments as a family. To drive down the street where you walked your baby and then toddler in a stroller, no longer the same. A taint, the house a symbol of the most important dream gone. But time would have made it different had we stayed and then later left as a family. The body and heart feel the passing of time. Youth disabused, they'll never get old. That a house or city won't be their home. Yet some long for a past that is no longer there, can no longer be there. A companion and lover different, taken by time, and maybe never really seen as they really were. There we go. Let me see. You know, I got like a funny one. I don't know if it's funny, but
yeah. No, I'm sure it'll be funny.
So
everything's funny if approached in a certain way, right?
So I'm going to call this poem Celestia. Okay. So I don't know why some My Little Ponies have wings. Tiny tyrant during the pandemic cries running down the hall. Alistia is a white unicorn. Daddy not understanding the assonation right correctly, holding in My Little Pony. Dad, are we going to play? Dad, are we going to play? Yeah, I'm waiting for you. You're watching TV, Disney Plus, gummy bears, hiding from things that are too scary. She would not eat chili dogs and chocolate pudding, but wanted spaghetti. Little did she know it's made from zucchini. Like when we go on our afternoon bike rides, I like to go my way, she likes to say, and most of the time, that's fine with me.
I dig it.
I'm your night moon sister who only comes out in the night, I repeat to her, bouncing on the couch. This is Alistia's favorite episode of Gummy Bears with the island. I tell the Empress in character, and she accepts the iteration, improvisation. Alistia has wings like Luna, the instructor tells me after, flying like this to the moon, down the hall in her room. And when I, Alistia, flew with Luna to the moon, it may have been the early evening light, a gray with cold from the snow out the window. It felt isolated and a vacuum, like space, her room, the moon. But we must fly back to tell Sparkle something in the living room. I don't know why some My Little Ponies have wings and some do not. Come in from the rain, you silly, she tells me, and talk to them. Talk to them. 4-year-olds have tricks Catch me or I'll die. Taekwondo. Just because they dove over your shoulder and flipped and you caught them means that they can and always will. Especially sugar-filled attack head first without cares in world. Play vision tyrant. Cuteness gives primary authority. I'm a babe and want Kool-Aid. No Patti LaBelle beef brisket stew. I want cheesy chicken pasta, so I make that too. She needed 2 hands of bites to make chocolate cookies, so now that's what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. So, do you compose with pen?
Gosh.
Like largely, like what's your method of composition, or how do you like to write, or which ways do you use? Those look like they were handwritten.
Yeah, I generally like write on a piece of paper. Sometimes I'll just get inspired and grab a piece of paper and write it. Like this, I just wrote on a piece of paper and then like threw it in my drawer, or that I wrote on a piece of paper, sometimes in a journal. But it seems like when you do it on your phone, it's not that it's bad, but like it's almost like you're texting. You know what I mean? It's like it doesn't feel like as like it feels like it affects like the rhythm of it. Where like if you're writing it on pen, like the rhythm's going to be like different. So okay, also like with My Little Pony, because we figured it out because we've watched more My Little Pony. That was when she was like 4, and Alistia. So she kept saying Alistia, right? She says it's Alistia, and I'm like, but it was Celestia. It was Celestia and like Luna. So those are like the big like Celestia, not Alistia, but she was like 4.
Are those two of the main ponies?
With My Little Pony, so there's Earth ponies. Those are like the 2 like main ponies. Those are like the lead. But like so there's Earth ponies. There's Pegasi, right? They just have wings. There's Unicorn. They don't have wings. And then there's all the corns, and they have wings and the unicorn. So those are the 4 types of My Little Pony. And then there's like Celestia and Luna are like, I don't know, they're like slightly different like My Little Ponies, but they're like all the corns, but they got
it all.
So this is one. I don't know. I really don't have like a title, but this is kind of. I'll just read it. Okay, so alone, I have planned to go skateboarding at the pump track, or go to the coffee shop or library to write, but a weight in my whole body tells me I don't want to. Like in the past, forcing myself to arrive, and having arrived, a narrowness of vision, not wanting to do anything, let alone be there, or necessarily anywhere. Seeing people functioning with other people, a weird glow to my vision, my body feeling like it could or is somewhat folding into itself. And then driving with nowhere to go, with the remembrance of arriving when I don't want to, self-conscious of being alone, and that my purpose, now a heavy body and stream of thought, too overwhelming to do, or if done, completely forced without pleasure. So many memories of trying to force it without a breakthrough, to a flow or an enjoyment, to arrive and feel completely alone. That while trying to fight it, to show up, but to arrive with the same weight, despite plans for things that are joyful or meaningful in and its effect. Then driving with nowhere to go, but eventually home, after maybe a coffee to try and break through, a plan to get out and into the world, but this weight and coned vision, someone who is not right and unwell, even when trying my hardest, ending up driving with no place to go, and home to an alienation, that despite doctors that do manage this, that despite efforts, still at times, there's nothing I can do, that yes, it will pass, it will return, that I am ill, that I am different, that I am alone. Sometimes I do sit and write at the coffee shop and then drive through the suburban streets at night with a piece with music and blurred neon, shadowed strip malls and homes, a few routes I take for years that comfort me, driving to a destination to turn around or get a burrito or milkshake. Without this weight, but alone, I don't tell people about this, other that I often go to a coffee shop to read or write, then cruise around. It's not that they could, in parts, in abstract, understand, but a burden in their eyes to hear with really no answer. But if the weight is there, or light enough to lift, or somehow far away, like it couldn't exist again, and that clearly seen that I am ill, that I can see it, but not undo the feeling, a plan forced to arrive and be there to soon leave. And alone I think of ways, hope actually, to address this, plans, even doctors, strategies, aware mostly when it is happening. But it is in my body, my vision, a weight I carry somewhere. It arrives with me, it gets back in the car with me, and we go home.
Nice. Man.
Yeah. So yeah, just, being depressed and like trying to like do it, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm depressed, I'm at home, I'm gonna go to the library, I'm gonna go to the coffee shop, and then like, or skateboarding or something, and I like force myself to do it, and I get there and I'm like, no, I brought the depression with me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Wherever you go, there you are, right? That's it's one of those unavoidable truths.
Yeah.
But man, no, I love the cadence of your poetry, like the kind of rhythm. It has something. It has some jazz like to it. I really appreciate hearing it read. And do you feel, is there for you a connection between poetry and music?
I like I definitely like try to make it melodic. And like some of them, I don't think a lot of them like came off as like pop songs, but like there was a point where I was writing a lot of like song type lyrics or like melody. So I'm definitely into like melody. Melody is huge, and obviously like the rhythm and the cadence. So that was like a longer one where I just kind of let myself go. And that probably you can see the rhythm and the cadence even more on that one. Where like maybe the first poem I read like that was more like, reflective, and it was like kind of like a four line stanza. And it was very kind of like maybe more meditative and like controlled, where like some of them are less controlled.
Yeah.
And so that one, yeah, like that one's kind of a bummer, but like
no, but a good bummer. I mean, it's very descriptive.
I like being alone, and like I like doing so. Like, okay, I'm gonna go like skateboarding. I'm gonna go to the library. I'm gonna go to the coffee shop, and then like trying to like be like get out of my head, get out of like this funk or whatever, and then I just go there, and it's just like, you know what I mean? It's like fucking horrible. And it's like,
yeah,
but the ironic part is that like is that like I'm trying my hardest, right? I'm like, I'm gonna fucking deal with this shit, but then like it's not working.
Yeah, well, and it's not like you're going to the bar to like like have a big bender or something, or like the things you describe are like they're responsible ways to deal with the problem of depression or of isolation or of alienation. I think like it's legit to want to go out. But I can definitely relate to that. Like I'm someone who I like to be alone. Like I like to go to films alone if I can, like cultural events. Like I enjoy being at those things as well with other people, with my partner, with friends, with my kids even. But there's something about doing things alone that can be restorative. But it's a double-edged sword often, because if you're in a weird state, it's like, let's say, especially if you're feeling depressed, like going out seems like a good thing, getting yourself around other people, but then it is maybe counter to the experience in some ways as well. So there's kind of like no avoiding it. But then you can make art out of that, and poetry, and that tension, and you can kind of live it through, and you process it, you digest it, and you come out the other end. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I do enjoy reading and hearing poetry, and I don't think a lot of people necessarily do, or they got to be like tricked into it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like in a movie or like in a pop song or something. Like there's like some like heartbreaking things in like pop music, but like it's upbeat and you don't really like notice it. Like you have to like almost like trick people into something poetic, because if they're like, oh, you want to like go to a poetry reading, like most people would be like, oh yeah, I gotta like gotta do laundry or something. You know what I mean? Like they're not gonna necessarily like want to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
for better or worse.
So I got like one more just
please.
to
the cherry on top.
Sometimes I listen to That's My Job by Conway Twitty and cry a little bit. Waiting for the plumber is depressing. Being grateful is a continual process. If you believe something, you are. I'd say you're delusional if it's true or not. Hope is also a continual process. I had yanked out wet drywall to find the leak. My dog Franklin is such a gift. After an hour or so of anxiety and tension, I announced, the house will not defeat me. I will defeat the house. I said it to the baby in my wife's belly. It's good to teach a good work ethic and attitude early. Sometimes things suck and are hard and you just have to do them and then they're done. My dad taught me that. He can be a bit of a hard ass, but is also a self-described, sensitive 90s type of guy. Sometimes I listen to That's My Job by Conway Twitty and cry a little bit. That's the end.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. And like here, for people who don't know who Conway Twitty is, because I assume of people who are watching or listening to this, like 1% may, but they're
people don't.
Like just tell us, describe Conway Twitty, like their music and their appearance.
Well, I'm not a huge, I don't know a ton about Conway Twitty. He's like a 70s country artist who's a little cheesy. Mm-hmm. And so the song That's My Job is basically like about a dad telling like the kid that's my job. Like he woke up crying in the first verse is like, I woke up crying in the middle of the night, went to my dad, and he's like, oh, he like soothed him and that's my job. And then like one of the lines is like, I was going out to California to make my name in the music business and needed like some money or like some help. And the dad said, oh, that's my job. So it's like, mm-hmm. It's a very sweet song. I suggested that he is like, there's a really like cheesy, like not like creepy, but it's like this kind of like one of those 70s like sexual songs that are kind of like, well, I don't know. There's one of his hits is like this, like, I don't know, like one of those 70s kind of like creepy, mm-hmm. like kind of like love songs.
Okay, what's that one called? Or like what makes it creepy? Yes,
dude, I don't know. Like if you've like, I don't know, because it depends on how old you are, but like you might hear it just like walking in a grocery mm-hmm. store or something. It's like, something like, oh, you're my lovely, and
yes.
Something along those lines.
Yes. Okay. You want to treat that like one of your recommendations, or we can toss that one in. Let's transition to the recommendations.
I do.
And you can like tell us like album, song, book, film, mix and match, whatever you'd like.
So yeah, like I talked about this book earlier, the Kokoro.
Yeah. Yes.
So it came out in like 1916.
Mm-hmm.
It's about this younger guy, this teacher, and he's wondering why he kind of rejected life, and it kind of plays out. And now it's really good. And I think it's like he's like one of the top 5 Japanese authors. So I would suggest that. It's very sentimental, but like it's very like there's a lot of heart to it. Kokoro is called heart. That translates. Kokoro is that.
Nice. Would you say it's like a little bit more well-rounded or human of a take than the No Longer Human book by Osamu Dazai? Because like that's like also early 20th century, or that's like mid-century, right? Like post-war. But like earlier Japanese literature, but that is like the disintegration of somebody. It
came out in 1916. So like the Western influence of like the I novel mm-hmm. hadn't really like kicked in yet. So like the Osamu Dazai, like he did like in the 30s. I think it was more in the 30s, 1930s, mm-hmm. and he's like more the I novel, mm-hmm. and it's somewhat like self-destructive, and then so Kokoro, this guy died in like 19-teens. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really before the I novel mm-hmm. became like more popular mm-hmm. in Japan, where they were still like, influenced by the West, because like that, the Western influence in Japan in the early 20th century and like late 19th century, or,
mm-hmm.
It come fairly big because they didn't have that. You know, they were like cut off from Western culture from like prior to 1860, and then they got like forced by the U.S. government in like 1860 to start like interacting with the rest of the world. Like I think in like late 1850s, the U.S. like had a ship just roll up on Japan, and they're just like, hey, you need to like deal with the outside world, or we're gonna just like come in and like attack you, basically.
Yeah.
So like this guy, Ryūnosuke Akutagawa, that guy, he was an influence on Osamu Dazai.
Okay.
So he was born in like 1890, but then like, so there was a Russian-Japanese war in like 1904 or 1905.
Yeah, that's right.
And then you know how like wars also oftentimes like meld cultures and bring in stuff. So like he was like maybe a teenager, and he started so he started reading a lot of like more Western stuff came to Japan about 1904, 1905.
And Japan was victorious in that war, right? Against against Russia, and that was kind of like a demonstration of their prowess as a nation or whatnot. Or that's like the narrative, right? And
I really don't know much about it, and I think they're fighting over Korea. So I just saw something like briefly on the internet that like Russia and Japan were fighting over Korea. That's my guess. So I don't really know much about it other than it brought a lot of Western culture to Japan. But Kokoro is really good, and it has like less of the self-destructive elements of some of the other novels, but it still has that unfortunate Japanese ending that it often does have. So then the other one is called Kappa, Cappa, and it's by Ryūnosuke Akutagawa. I can't even like, I'm not good with that, but he was a little older. He was younger than the Kokoro guy. So his like writing was like 19 teens to 1927, but he wrote one, and it was like, so this is my second suggestion is Kappa, and it's almost like Alice in Wonderland. So like these Kappa, they're these mythological creatures in Japan where they're like 2 feet tall, or they're not like, you know, they're like 2 feet tall and they're gray. And so they're like, I think they're a mythological creature, but basically like this person's going through, and he literally goes into the rabbit hole like Alice in Wonderland, and he goes into this like society of these Kappas, and he like lives there for a long time, and they like explore all these like philosophical things. So like it's a society with like structures and like people, and so like he is like allowed to like stay there as like a guest as long as he wants, and he like, you know, he becomes friends with artists and like industry people and like mayors and all these people, and like it's the society. And like when I actually read it, I was like, oh man, Dave would love this one, because it's very philosophical, because he's able to like go down this rabbit hole and then like explore all these ideas and like philosophical ideas from like a removed spot.
Now that sounds really cool.
And it's very interesting, because it's like,
it does
so Kappa, I would suggest that one to you.
Perfect. I'm gonna like order that right now. So
and then my third one would be Conway Twitty, That's My Job. You could just go on YouTube and do That's My Job by Conway Twitty.
Yes, I will put links into the show notes.
But it depends on like, if you're like you know, I'm born in the late 70s, so I'm like kind of Gen X a little bit, but like, so if you're like a little bit older, like you might have heard some Conway Twitty.
Thanks very much, dude, for those recommendations. And yeah, thanks so much for this wonderful chat and for sharing with us so much of your work. I think this was a really nice contribution to the podcast. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, I had a lot of fun. It was cool. Thanks for listening to my poems.
Yeah. Anytime.
Nice opportunity to read them.
Yeah. So. No, I think I know I will not be alone in enjoying them. So, all right. Then Brian, we will talk to you soon, my buddy, and everybody else. We'll see you for the next episode of the We hope you enjoyed this conversation with
Brian.
The Deadbeat Philosophy Podcast is a co-production of Deadbeat Media and the Museum Hegel-Haus Stuttgart. For more Deadbeat content and to chip in to keep the channel going, check us out at deadbeatphilosophy.substack.com. For more about the Museum Hegel-Haus, check out hegelhaus.de. That's HEGEL-HAUS.de. Adios and auf Wiedersehen.